The fluorescent lights of Miller's grocery cast a cold, steady glow over shelves piled high with fruit rhythmic and distant, like a heartbeat echoing through an empty room. The hum of barcode scanners, the clatter of shopping carts, the squeak of rubber soles on tile, all blended into the familiar symphony of a suburban evening in Kent, Washington. Brandon Johnson pushed an empty cart down the produce aisle, his mind blank except for the simple plan to buy a few apples and return to his cold apartment. 7 months had passed since the day he signed the divorce papers. 7 months since Camille's hand slipped from his for the last time. 7 months since their once bustling home fell silent, like an abandoned building swallowed by dust. He had tried to discipline himself to live like a man who only worked and existed. Mornings at the construction site, evenings with instant noodles and a muted TV meant to fill the void. He told himself that time would make things easier, but time, he'd learned, only stretched the emptiness thinner, never erased it. Brandon stopped at the apple stand. His broad hand lifted a bright red one and dropped it into a plastic bag. 1, 2, 3. Each motion mechanical until he saw her. Camille, Washington. She was a few aisles away, at the organic produce section, one hand pressed gently against her lower back, the other choosing tomatoes. Her long black curls spilled over her shoulders, catching the pale supermarket light. Everything inside Brandon froze: his breath, his pulse, his thoughts. Camille, the woman he had promised to protect for life, the woman he had let go without a fight. But what froze his blood wasn't her face, the gentle, unmistakable curve beneath her pale blue dress, the roundness of pregnancy. 7 months. The apple slipped from Brandon's hand, rolling across the floor until it stopped by his boot. In his mind, numbers collided in chaos. 7 months since the divorce. 7 months pregnant. 8 months since that last night together, filled with arguments and silence. She hadn't terminated the pregnancy. Brandon's breath caught. His fingers gripped the shopping cart handle so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The memory of that night rushed back. Camille holding the pregnancy test, trembling, tears and joy mingling in her eyes. "Brandon, we're going to have a baby," she'd whispered, voice soft as air. And him? He'd only stared at the bills on the table, drowning in debt, his company on the verge of collapse, workers unpaid. Then he'd said the most foolish words of his life. "We can't afford this, Camille. We're barely staying afloat. Maybe we should consider other options." She hadn't argued, just looked at him, her eyes dimming, like someone blowing out a candle in the dark. 3 weeks later, she walked out with the divorce papers. "I can't stay with a man who doesn't want his own child," she said. And now she was still carrying that child, their child, through 7 months of loneliness he hadn't shared. Brandon stood frozen in the aisle. The faint music drifted overhead, the scent of apples and tomatoes mixing with the sterile chill of fluorescent light. Everything seemed distant except Camille, carefully placing tomatoes in her basket, every motion gentle, deliberate, as if her entire world revolved around the life within her. Then she turned. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough to seize Brandon's heart. Camille's face paled. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, a quiet gesture of protection. Even now, she was afraid he could hurt the baby. Shame surged through him like a wave. He wanted to run to her, to say "I'm sorry," to say I was wrong, to kneel and touch her belly to feel his child, but his feet wouldn't move. Camille turned away, pushing her cart in haste. "Camille," he called softly, his voice breaking, but she didn't stop. Brandon abandoned his cart, running through the aisles, apples rolling underfoot. By the time he reached the checkout, she was gone. Only her half-filled cart remained. He burst into the parking lot, the cold wind stinging his face. Among the cars, he caught a glimpse of her old Honda starting up, the red tail lights flaring before merging into the traffic. He stood beneath the dim neon lights, hands slack at his sides. The first autumn rain began to fall light at first, then heavier. For the first time in 7 months, Brandon understood what loneliness truly felt like. That night, his apartment felt like an abandoned warehouse. He sat before his phone, typing Camille's number, then erasing it over and over. He imagined a dozen ways to begin. "I'm sorry I let you go." Or, I don't deserve to be a father, but I want to make it right. But no words seemed brave enough to send. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain against the window. One image kept returning in his mind, Camille's hand resting on her belly. That tender, fierce gesture pierced his heart. She had chosen the child over him. She had chosen love. He had chosen fear. At 2 a.m., Brandon sat up. Streetlight filtered through the window, cutting across his tired face. He knew if he did nothing, he would lose everything, not just Camille, but the child he once refused. For the first time in 7 months, Brandon exhaled with purpose. He would find her not to win her back, but to do the right thing, to be a father. The next morning, Seattle was wrapped in grey mist, dew glistening on car windows. Brandon started his old Ford pickup and drove toward the city. There was no address, no plan, just faith that fate had given him a second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. 3 days later, Camille still haunted his thoughts. Every street reminded him of her, the cafe they once loved, the snowy road they'd driven together, the church where she liked to hear the choir. He drove through rain-damp streets, wind scattering maple leaves across the hood. Autumn in Seattle always carried the scent of rain, soft, melancholic, bittersweet. Amid the fog, Brandon realized there was nothing more painful than watching the woman you love face life alone. So he began to search. He called Mrs. Patterson, first Camille's foster mother, who had stood beside her at their wedding. The line rang, then a voicemail. Mrs. Patterson has moved to Greenview Care Center. He wrote down the address. That afternoon, he visited Greenview. Mrs. Patterson lay in a room with a window overlooking the garden. Her hair was completely white, but her smile was still kind. When Brandon entered, she studied him for a long time before saying, "I thought you'd never show up again." "I know I hurt Camille," Brandon said quietly, eyes down. "But I need to know if she's okay. Can you tell me where she's living?" She sighed. "Camille doesn't want anyone telling you, but you should know she's close to her due date. She's still working, still taking care of herself. The baby's healthy." Brandon bit his lip. "I just want to help. I can't let her go through this alone." Mrs. Patterson looked at him, stern but warm. "You need to understand something, Brandon. Forgiveness doesn't come from words. It takes time. If you really want to help, be patient, and don't make her feel cornered." He nodded. As he left the care center, rain began to fall again, fine, needle-sharp Seattle rain soaking through his jacket. Yet something in his chest felt lighter, warmer. Camille was still out there, still fighting, still alive. He would find her, but this time, with respect. On the 4th day, driving through the shopping district in Renton, Brandon saw something familiar. A silver Honda Civic parked outside a pharmacy has scratches on the bumper, and a Support Foster Care Awareness decal is on the rear Camille's car. His heartbeat quickened. He parked at a distance and watched. A few minutes later, Camille came out carrying a small bag of medical supplies, strolling toward the car. She wore a long sweater, her hair tied back, her movements heavy yet graceful. He didn't call out. He just sat, watching through the windshield, afraid a single word might make her disappear again. Camille opened the car door, placed the bag on the passenger seat, then sat down, exhaling tiredly. Her hand went to her belly again, a gesture Brandon knew by heart. In the rearview mirror, she seemed to sense something. She turned, and their eyes met. Just a few seconds. But this time, Camille didn't look startled. She only held his gaze, quiet, then shook her head, not in anger, but as if to say, "Don't follow me." Brandon nodded slightly, signaling he understood. She started the car and drove away. He followed with his eyes as the Honda turned onto a side street, leading to an old apartment complex, Sunset Gardens. The sign read, "Family Housing, Affordable Living." He had found where she lived. That night, Brandon parked across the street from the building. The light in apartment 2C glowed warm and golden. Through the window, he saw Camille folding baby clothes. Her silhouette bathed in soft light, peaceful, almost sacred. He didn't approach. He only sat in his truck, watching quietly, ensuring she was safe. As the night deepened, cold seeped in. Brandon asked himself, "What am I doing?" He was no longer her husband. He had no right to be here. but his heart refused reason. When the light went out, he finally started the engine. The hum of the truck blended with the steady rain, carrying a silent vow whispered into the night. I won't leave you alone again, Camille. Even if you're not ready to forgive me, I'll still be here. Seattle kept raining as if the sky itself wept with him. But beneath the rain, something softer lingered. Something warm, maybe hope. There are memories we can never truly erase, not because they hurt, but because they were once so beautiful that it feels impossible to accept we ever lost them. For Brandon Johnson, that memory began on a June afternoon 4 years ago, at the Rainier Community Center, where his life quietly changed course with a single smile. That day, Seattle was drenched in rare sunlight. The golden light streamed through the windows, spilling across blueprints and scattered rulers. Brandon, then 29, was running a small construction company that had just landed a community playground project. He was bent over the plans, shirt sleeves rolled up, hands still dusty with wood shavings, a tall man, capable and grounded, but with the unpolished awkwardness of someone more at home on a job site than in an office. "Are you Brandon Johnson?" a woman asked from behind him. He turned. She stood in a simple red dress, holding a thick stack of files. Soft black curls framed her face. Her skin glowed warm under the light. Her bright, steady, disarmingly kind smile softened the entire room. "I'm Camille Washington," she said. "My organization's managing the community grant for this project." Her tone was clear and professional, but quiet gentleness was beneath it. Brandon shook her hand, though his heart had already gone ahead of him. Maybe it was right then, amid the hum of saws and sunlight through glass, that he knew he would love this woman. In the following weeks, they worked side by side nearly every afternoon. Camille was meticulous, always thinking about the people who would use the space. Will this area be safe for kids? Can we add more benches for parents? Brandon, used to clients who cared only about costs and deadlines, felt something shift inside him whenever she asked questions like that. She wasn't just building a playground, she was building trust. One late afternoon, as the project neared completion, they stood together watching the newly painted slides gleam under the sunday. Brandon wiped sweat from his brow and half joked, "You know, I've never met anyone who makes me want to do my job this carefully." Camille laughed, sunlight flickering across her face. "So you just needed someone to keep you in check?" "Maybe," he said, smiling. "Or maybe I just wanted to impress you." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. She only shook her head, still smiling. From that moment on, what they shared was no longer work. Their evenings stretched into coffee hours in Camille's small kitchen filled with the scent of roasted beans, paperwork, and the rhythm of Seattle rain outside her window. She told him about her childhood in foster care and her dream to help children like herself find families who would stay. He told her about his father, a bricklayer who'd guided his small hands to lay the first stone, and about his dream to build something lasting with his family's name. Two people from different worlds, united by one desire, to build, not just homes but lives. A year later, they married. A small ceremony at the same Rainier Community Center where they'd met. Brandon wore a grey suit. Camille, a simple white dress. No fireworks, no luxury, just sunflowers, laughter, and the quiet joy of people who believed in each other. Camille's foster mother, Mrs. Patterson, walked her down the aisle. Brandon still remembered her trembling smile, her cold hands gripping his as she said her vows. The first years of marriage were modest but warm. Their little house in Kent had a lavender-lined porch. Brandon left for the job site each morning. Camille worked for a non-profit. In the evenings, they cooked together. There were lean days. Yes, but never without laughter. Camille was the light in that house. She rose early to make him coffee, leaving small notes on the counter. "Have a great day, Mr. Builder." He brought home sunflowers every weekend in return. Their love was simple, steady like breathing, like the pulse beneath a hand, until the world tilted. In their third year of marriage, the construction market crashed. One of Brandon's leading suppliers went bankrupt, leaving him with a six-figure debt. Contracts dissolved, workers quit. Brandon pushed harder, working longer, selling his truck to make payroll. He didn't want to worry Camille, but the bills continued. One night, Camille found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by invoices and ledgers, his fingers buried in his hair. "Are you okay?" she asked. Brandon forced a smile. "Yeah. Just some contracts gone wrong." "You've been at this all week," she said softly. "Take a break." "I can't. I need to figure out how to keep us afloat." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to fight this alone, Brandon. We're a team, remember?" Those words meant to comfort only made him feel smaller. Pride, that fragile armor, bristled under her compassion. He fell silent and gently brushed her hand away. Camille froze, and from that day, a thin crack formed between them, a hairline distance that widened with each passing night. Brandon worked longer hours. He stopped coming home for dinner, joking and letting her in. He told himself he'd make it up to her once things got better. But in love, later can be too late. The door opened one rainy afternoon as Brandon wrestled with unpaid bills. Camille stood there, holding a small pharmacy bag. Her face glowed with a quiet joy. "Hey," she said softly, "I have news." Brandon looked up. She was trembling as she pulled out a pregnancy test, two bright red lines. For a heartbeat, he just stared. She laughed through her tears. "We're having a baby, Brandon. I can't believe it." For a moment, his chest filled with pure, astonished joy. He wanted to grab her, to laugh, to cry. But then his gaze fell to the stacks of overdue notices, the negative balance in his account. The smile faded. Camille saw the change. Her voice quivered. "You're not happy?" He shook his head. "It's not that. It's just you know how bad things are. I haven't paid my guys. The mortgage is overdue. I just what? I'm scared I can't care for you and the baby. Maybe we should think about other options." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Camille stood still, as though she'd just heard a foreign language. "Other options? I only meant if..." "You mean getting rid of the baby, Brandon?" He said nothing. A silence so sharp it stung. "Oh my God," Camille whispered, tears spilling. "I thought you'd be happy. I thought, at least you'd hold me." "I'm just worried about you," he said weakly. "No, you're worried about money. You've forgotten what love even is." She turned away, her tears vanishing into the sound of rain. Brandon wanted to stop her and explain, but his throat locked. Any word he said would sound hollow. The door slammed, and with that sound, something inside him closed too. For 3 days, Camille didn't speak to him. She still went to work, left dinner in the fridge, and moved through the house gently. But her silence was glass transparent, fragile, and impenetrable. Brandon tried to talk a few times, but she only offered polite, brittle smiles. On the third night, he couldn't stand it anymore. He knocked on her bedroom door. "Camille, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." Her voice came through, hoarse. "What do you want, Brandon?" "I just want you. I don't want to lose you." The door opened. Camille stood there, eyes red, holding her robe tight around her. "Do you want this baby?" Brandon froze. He wanted to say yes, but the numbers, the debt, the fear, all crowded his mind. "I don't know," he breathed. Those 3 words buried everything. Camille looked at him so long that he couldn't lift his eyes. Finally, she nodded, tears streaming silently. "That's enough." The next morning, when Brandon woke, her side of the closet was empty. On the table lay a folded note. "I can't stay with a man who won't love what's most precious to me. I hope you find what you're looking for. Camille." Brandon's hands shook as he read it. He rushed out, drove through the city, and left a voicemail on her phone. At her office, they told him she'd taken leave. Camille had vanished, as if she'd never existed. The months that followed turned Brandon into a shadow. He worked, he slept, he drank cheap beer. He tried to forget through noise, through drills and deadlines, but every night, the silence brought her back. Her voice, touch, and smile the day she said, "We're having a baby." That was the last time he saw her truly smile. Then 7 months passed, until that night at Miller's grocery under the fluorescent light, when he saw Camille again, still beautiful, still calm, but now carrying what he had once refused, a 7-month belly. Brandon understood then that some things must be rebuilt from the ground up, no matter how late it seems. And this time, he wouldn't let fear win. Outside, Seattle kept raining steady and endless, like memory itself. But beneath that rain, Brandon walked forward, a fragile flame of hope flickering inside him. Love hadn't really shattered. Maybe it was only waiting to be mended by two hands, and a heart that had finally learned how to grow. In the days after seeing Camille at Miller's grocery, Brandon Johnson moved through life like a sleepwalker. Everything he did was automatic: wake up, make coffee, pull on his jacket, head to the job site, talk to his crew about blueprints, then return to his empty apartment to eat canned noodles in silence. But inside him, something had begun to shift quietly, persistently, like rain falling on Seattle rooftops without pause. Camille's image wouldn't leave his mind. Her hand on her belly, the shock in her eyes when she saw him, the way she fled. Each time he closed his eyes, the scene replayed like an old film. How is she living? Is she okay? Does she have someone with her? The questions clung to him, minute after minute. By Wednesday morning, Brandon couldn't stand it anymore. He got in his truck and drove toward the downtown office where Camille used to work the Community Development Alliance. The sign was still there, the glass doors covered in posters about family support programs. He parked across the street and watched for a moment. A middle-aged woman came out, Patricia Chin, the director. He recognized her immediately. She had once invited his crew to help build that playground years ago. Brandon stepped out of his truck and walked up to her. "Hi, Miss Patricia," he said, his voice cautious. She turned, surprised. "Brandon Johnson? My goodness, it's been ages. Still in construction?" "Yes, thank you. I just wanted to see how things are." He hesitated, asked, "Is Camille still working here?" Patricia's expression softened, her eyes flickering between sympathy and restraint. "You didn't know? She left a few months ago. Health reasons, needed rest." Brandon nodded, his chest heavy. "Did she say where she was going?" "Not exactly. But I heard she's renting an apartment at Sunset Gardens in Renton." Patricia studied him for a long moment. "You're looking for her?" "Yes, I need to talk to her." Patricia was silent for a while, then said gently, "I don't know what happened between you two, Brandon, but Camille has a good heart. If you go to her, do it with respect. She's been through a lot." Brandon swallowed hard. "I just want to make sure she's okay." That afternoon, he drove to Sunset Gardens Apartments, a worn complex tucked along a rain-soaked road. The old sign hung crooked, paint peeling. Some windows glowed faintly yellow. In the small courtyard, a few children played in the drizzle. He parked at the end of the row and looked up at the windows, trying to guess which one was hers. Memories flooded him. How Camille once dreamed of a house with a balcony, a garden, morning sunlight streaming in, and now she was living in this humble place to raise the child he had once rejected. Brandon gripped the steering wheel until his hands hurt, the rain hammering the windshield like reproach. He wanted to knock on every door, to call her name, but reason held him back. If Camille saw him now, what would she think? The man who had walked away, suddenly returning, saying he wanted to help. He sat silently, eyes fixed on apartment 2C with pale blue curtains. A warm light glowed from inside. He saw a figure move, a silhouette he would know anywhere. Camille, hanging up a tiny cream-colored baby shirt. Brandon's throat tightened. Their baby. He was not yet born, and he had already missed so much. A gust of wind swept through, carrying the damp smell of earth. The rain fell harder. Night settled over Seattle. He drove away quietly, but his heart wouldn't rest. That was the first time he'd seen Camille up close since the divorce, and the first time he understood what it meant to feel pain intertwined with hope. The next morning, he returned, and the next after that. He never knocked, never called, just sat in his truck, watching from afar, to be sure she was safe. He saw her leave for work each morning, return each evening, strolling under the weight of her belly. She often stopped at the playground, smiling faintly as she watched children play. On Monday night, the rain poured harder than ever. Brandon waited in his truck. At 7 sharp, Camille's silver Honda pulled into the lot, but as it stopped, white smoke billowed from under the hood. The car had overheated. She shut off the engine, got out, and stared helplessly. Brandon hesitated briefly before grabbing his umbrella and striding through the downpour. "Need a hand?" he called, his voice rough through the rain. Camille startled. When she saw who it was, the color drained from her face. "You?" She stepped back, instinctively placing a hand over her belly. "What are you doing here?" "I saw your car. I'm not following you, Camille. I just happened to be here." Her eyes were cool, though not as fierce as the last time. Maybe the rain had washed the edge off both of them. "You don't have to get involved," she said quietly but firmly. "I can call roadside assistance. That'll take hours. Let me take a look, okay?" Camille said nothing momentarily, then reluctantly nodded, perhaps because the rain was too heavy for an argument. Brandon popped the hood. Steam rose in a white cloud. He frowned. Coolant hose burst. "You can't drive it like this." Camille sighed, cradling her stomach. "Then how am I supposed to get to work tomorrow?" "I know a guy at Patterson's Auto. I'll have him tow it." "That's not necessary." "Please, Camille. I'm just trying to help. Nothing more." She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "Just this once." Brandon smiled faintly, as if granted a minor miracle. "I'll take care of it. Let me help you with your bags for now. It's pouring." "You don't have to," she murmured. "I want to." He took her shopping bags from the trunk and held the umbrella over her as they climbed the narrow, creaking stairs. Camille unlocked apartment 2C. Warm light spilled out, carrying the faint scent of vanilla and milk. Brandon caught only a glimpse. A small, tidy space, a white crib by the wall, a half-finished knitted blanket folded on a chair. "Thanks. You can leave the bag there," she said. Brandon set it down and stood for a moment. "Camille, you should go. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." His voice trembled so real she couldn't ignore it. Outside, the rain pattered steadily, thunder distant, the air thick with earth and silence. "I know sorry isn't enough," he said, "but I've regretted it every single day. I was a fool to think money mattered more than family. I lost everything because of that fear." Camille's arms tightened around her belly. Her eyes softened, if only for a moment. "You can't just show up and say, sorry, Brandon." "I know, but I'll prove it even if it's only through small things." She said nothing. The rain drummed harder. "Your car will be fixed tomorrow," he said. "I'll pay for it, and I don't expect you to pay me back." Camille looked at him, her gaze equal parts, warmth and distance. "I'll pay. You don't have to." "I will." Brandon smiled faintly. "Okay, but promise me you'll eat dinner. I saw your fridge. It's pretty empty." Camille froze. "You looked?" "Just happened to notice." She sighed, opening the door wider. "Thank you, but go home, Brandon. Don't make this harder." He nodded. "I'll go, but if you need anything, I'll be nearby." She didn't answer. When he stepped into the hall, the door closed behind him, not slammed, but gently. A small space, a small chance. Brandon walked down the stairs, gripping his umbrella. The rain was still heavy, but something inside him was melting, a thick layer of ice, covering his heart for 7 months. He looked up at her window. The light was still on. Her shadow moved behind the curtain, sitting by the crib, hands smoothing the soft knitted blanket. Brandon stood there for a long time, until the rain soaked through his shirt. He didn't know what the future held, only that he felt alive tonight, for the first time in months. The next morning, Brandon woke early. The sky was grey, but the rain had eased. He called Patterson's Auto Repair, his old shop in Kent. "Earl, it's me, Brandon Johnson." "I know that voice." The old man chuckled over the line. "What's broken this time?" "Not Mina. A friend's. She's pregnant, her car's overheated, coolant hose burst. I need you to tow and fix it, but she can't know I'm paying." "Got it?" A low whistle. "Ah, so you're trying to make amends, huh?" Brandon gave a weary laugh. "Something like that. Can you help?" "Sure thing. Send me the address." By noon, Brandon drove past Sunset Gardens. The tow truck was parked outside. Building C, hoisting the silver Honda. Camille stood under the awning, one hand on her belly, talking to the driver. He didn't approach, just watched from a distance. The sight filled him with both warmth and ache. She was still the same, strong enough to hold up the world if she had to. And maybe because of that strength, she was also easier to hurt than anyone he'd ever known. That evening, Brandon's phone rang. "Earl, car's done," the old mechanic said. "But you know what? That lady nearly gave me a heart attack. When I told her the bill was paid, she demanded to know who covered it and refused to leave till I told her." Brandon sighed, half smiling. "I figured, so, what now? I'll go explain." Earl paused, voice low. "Careful, Brandon. Some women are so strong they don't need us anymore. But sometimes, they wait for one good reason to trust again." The words stayed with Brandon all the way to the shop. Camille was in the waiting area when he walked in, resting one hand on her belly. Her sweater was damp, her hair loose from the rain. She looked up when she saw him, her eyes a mix of exhaustion and frustration. "You," she said quietly. "I should have guessed. I just wanted to help. I told you I didn't need it. You couldn't drive that car. I couldn't just do nothing. You don't get to decide that." Brandon nodded slowly. "You're right." The air was taut, humming with words unspoken. The old mechanic caught their look and quietly slipped away, leaving them alone. Finally, Camille sighed. "How much did you pay?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me. I just didn't want it to feel like charity." "Then stop doing it." She stood, but as she stepped, her face tightened, one hand gripping the chair. Brandon rushed to her. "Camille, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, breathing hard. "The baby's just kicking. Lately, it happens a lot." He helped her sit, grabbed a water bottle from the counter, and handed it to her. "Here, drink." She took a sip. When her breathing steadied, Brandon knelt beside her. "Camille," he said softly, "you've been alone for 7 months. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I need to know you and the baby are okay. That's my responsibility, not charity." She looked at him, and it pierced him to the core. "What's the point of caring now? I can't undo the past, but I can choose to do it right now." A single tear slid down Camille's cheek. She brushed it away quickly. "I'll accept the car, but just this once." Brandon nodded. "I understand." They stepped outside together. The air smelled of rain and gasoline. Camille opened the car door, then turned back to him. "Brandon," she said, "don't think I hate you. I don't. I'm just scared." He froze. "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I trust you again, I'll lose everything all over again." She shut the door, started the engine, and drove off. Brandon stood there, watching until the silver Honda disappeared around the corner. The sky was still heavy with clouds, but through them, a narrow beam of light pierced onto the wet pavement. He smiled faintly, not out of joy, but from the quiet realization that if she could say, "I don't hate you," then maybe, just maybe, there was still a minor road left to travel, one that led toward hope. There are mornings in Seattle when the rain has just stopped and the streets glisten with leftover water headlights reflecting like tears that haven't yet dried. Brandon sat in his old Ford pickup, a cup of hot coffee in hand, watching the rush of people outside. It had been 3 days since that encounter at Patterson's garage. 3 days since Camille told him she didn't hate him, only that she was afraid. Those words kept circling in his mind, quiet but sharp, each repetition cutting a little deeper. "I'm afraid that if I trust you again, I'll lose everything all over again." That sentence was both a wall and a doorway. Brandon knew he couldn't tear it down. He'd have to rebuild trust slowly, one brick at a time, just as his father once taught him to build with care and patience. That morning, he drove once more past Sunset Gardens apartments, not to spy, to see, from afar, that Camille was doing all right. In front of Building C, she descended the steps slowly, one hand on the railing, the other cradling her belly. Brandon rolled down his window, watching her not with the eyes of a man haunted by regret, but with those of someone learning, again, how to care. She wore a beige coat, her hair tied back, her face pale from sleeplessness. He knew she was in her final weeks of pregnancy, heavy, exhausted, but still steady, still graceful. She got into her car, probably heading to the hospital or a part-time shift. Brandon didn't follow. He just watched until her car disappeared around the corner. Then he exhaled and turned toward the shop. That morning, Patterson told him the car bill was settled, but Camille insisted on paying it back. Earl said she'd left a sealed envelope labeled, "No help accepted from someone who no longer holds responsibility for me." Brandon looked at the note and smiled faintly. She's still the same Camille I fell for, strong enough to make me love and fear her at once. That afternoon, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was tired, yet achingly familiar. "Brandon?" He stopped breathing. "Camille, I just wanted to thank you for helping with the car. I got it back. It's running fine." "I'm glad to hear that." There was a small silence. Then she spoke softly. "But don't do that again. I don't need anyone's pity. I need peace." "I understand," he said, "but I'm not doing it out of pity. I'm doing it because it's right. I want our child to have a father who deserves that title." On the other end, only a quiet breath. "Brandon," she whispered, "don't call it our child. When it's born, if you still want to be there, we'll talk then." He swallowed hard. "All right." When the call ended, hearing her voice again was enough to light up his entire grey day. Brandon went to Miller's grocery that evening, where everything had begun. In his hand was a small bouquet of sunflowers, not bright, not extravagant, just a few stems wrapped in brown paper. He remembered Camille saying sunflowers were flowers that never stop seeking the light, even when the sky is darkest. He placed the bouquet on the doorstep of apartment 2C, with a note. "Thank you for taking my call. I only hope you smiled a little today. B." By morning, the flowers were gone. He didn't know if she'd brought them in or thrown them away. But to him, it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was learning to love without expecting anything back. Days passed. Brandon threw himself into work, trying to do better, to be better. Then one morning, he received a call from Carol, the banker who'd often reminded him of his overdue loans. "Mr. Johnson, Montclair Development would like to meet you. They said someone recommended your company." Montclair Development? His heart skipped a beat. It was a major real estate firm, known for being notoriously selective. "Yes. They're launching a new housing project and want Johnson Construction to bid." Monday, 9 a.m. Brandon hung up, glancing around his small office and old desk, scattered blueprints, and a few photos of his crew smiling in the sunday. If he landed this contract, it could save his company. But what struck him most was knowing exactly who had made this happen. Camille. She still worked with the Community Development Alliance, which partnered with Montclair. She'd once mentioned the project in passing. He didn't need to ask. He knew. She was the one who had quietly put his name forward. He sat there for a long time. The woman he had hurt the most was helping him stand again, not with words or a meeting, but with silent grace. That day, for the first time in months, Brandon prayed, not for success, but for a chance to be worthy of the kindness of a woman who was still generous enough not to want to see him fall. Monday came. The sky was clear, rare for Seattle. Brandon wore his old white shirt and a tie, adjusting his collar in the mirror. He'd last dressed up like this on his wedding day. At Montclair Development, the meeting lasted 2 hours. When it ended, Richard Montclair, the director, shook his head. "I've heard good things about you, Mr. Johnson. Patricia Chin from Community Alliance says you're honest and dedicated." Brandon smiled faintly, his throat tightening. "Thank you, sir. I try to do my best. We need a trustworthy contractor for our North Seattle housing project, an 18-month build. If your work meets expectations, the next contract will be yours too." Brandon left the building with the contract in hand, the early spring breeze brushing against his shirt. He could hardly believe it. The company, his dream since he was 12, had just been saved by the woman whose trust he had once shattered. He drove straight to Sunset Gardens and parked in front of Building C. Camille sat on a wooden bench near the playground, her hands resting on her belly as she watched children run and laugh. Brandon approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Camille," he called softly. She looked up, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to say thank you." "For what?" "For recommending me to Montclair Development." She was quiet for a moment, her eyes drifting toward the distance. "I only did what was right. You deserve the chance, even after what I did to you." "Yes." She turned to him, her expression calm. "Because this baby deserves a father with a steady life." "I didn't help you, Brandon. I helped my child. Brandon nodded slowly. I understand. But still, thank you. They sat in silence for a moment. Children's laughter echoed around them. A soft breeze carried a few cherry blossom petals, one landing gently on Camille's hair. Brandon reached out to brush it away, then stopped himself. She noticed the gesture but didn't move. Do you want to sit? He sat on the other end of the bench. The distance between them was small, barely a breath, but it felt like miles crossed to him. How are you feeling? He asked quietly. Fine, except for the sleepless nights. The baby kicks constantly. What did the doctor say? Everything's okay. Due next month. Brandon smiled gently. I'd like to be there, not to interfere, to see our baby enter the world. Camille turned away slightly, her voice softer. You still have a lot to prove, Brandon. I know. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and sweet wood blossoms. A child tripped nearby, then burst into laughter. Camille smiled faintly at the sound, and Brandon realized it was the same smile he'd once fallen in love with. Camille, he said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to do small daily things that make your life easier. She didn't reply, but as she stood, she said quietly, I have a prenatal appointment next week. If you really want to prove something, be there. Brandon stood still, watching her walk away. Every step she took was a test, and he knew, as long as she gave him even a slight chance, he would spend the rest of his life making sure he never lost it again. That day, Seattle didn't rain. Only clouds drifted lazily across the rooftops inside Brandon's heart. A new season began. A season of patient, quiet faith. On Thursday morning, Seattle woke to a rare touch of sunlight. The pale light broke through the thick clouds, shining on rain-soaked streets that glimmered from the night before. Brandon Johnson woke earlier than usual. He stood before the mirror, shaved, combed his hair, and chose his cleanest shirt, the same shoes he'd worn on his wedding day. Not because he wanted to impress, but because today mattered. Today, he was allowed to go with Camille to her prenatal appointment. It was the first time in months she'd given him even a small place in her life, a fragile chance, but a real one. And Brandon knew that a single misstep could shatter it forever. On the way to Dr. Sarah Martinez's clinic, he stopped by a small cafe at the corner, where the air smelled of fresh pastries and warm sugar. He ordered 2 coffees, a sugar-free latte for Camille, she'd always liked the mild bitterness, and an Americano for himself. Holding the 2 cups, he took a deep breath, trying to steady the rhythm of his heart. Camille was already there when he reached the clinic parking lot. She wore a long blue dress and a grey cardigan, her face tired but radiant. She looked like part of spring itself in the soft morning light, delicate yet enduring. Brandon walked over, voice gentle. I got you coffee, the kind you like. Camille looked surprised. You remember? I remember everything. I've forgotten many things in life, but not what belongs to you. She accepted the cup without a word, just nodded lightly. Thank you. They walked inside together in silence. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant, its cream-colored walls lined with photos of newborns. Camille checked in at the front desk. The receptionist smiled. Welcome, parents of baby Hope. Room 3. Brandon blinked. Hope? Camille turned to him, her voice like a breeze. That's her name. I'm going to name her Hope. Hope. He smiled, eyes stinging. That's beautiful. I picked it at 12 weeks, she said. That's when the doctor told me the baby was stable. I always wanted her to know there's still hope no matter what happens. They entered the ultrasound room. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked up from her clipboard and grinned. Well, my girl finally has company today. So this must be the long-lost husband. Camille flushed slightly. Not husband anymore, but he's the baby's father. Dr. Martinez nodded, both firm and warm. Good. A father should be here. This is the most important stage. Camille lay down on the exam table, lifting her shirt slightly. Brandon stood at the head of the bed, fingers interlocked, heart pounding. The hum of the ultrasound machine filled the room, and then on the screen appeared a flicker of white and grey. There's the head, Dr. Martinez said softly, and the spine. Oh, look, she's kicking. Brandon let out a small, breathless laugh. She's kicking? Yes, the doctor smiled. Strong and healthy. Want to hear her heartbeat? He nodded. Dr. Martinez turned up the Doppler. The sound came thump-thump, thump-thump steady and sure, like a tiny drum in the quiet room. Brandon froze. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. A small rhythm, but stronger than any melody, apology, or regret. He turned toward Camille, tears slipping down before he could stop them. She was watching him too, her eyes soft, trembling. "That's our baby, Camille," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She's really ours." Camille didn't answer, but her hand resting on her belly relaxed, as if she were letting him come a little closer. Brandon slowly placed his hand over hers. She hesitated, then didn't pull away. In that small room, there was only the steady beat of their child's heart, and two people who had once lost each other, standing quietly as a new life called them back toward the same direction. After the ultrasound, they stopped at a small diner near the hospital. Camille ordered chicken soup. Brandon ordered just a sandwich. Sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off their glasses of water, filling the space with a rare peace. "Thank you for coming," Camille said, stirring her soup. "I should be the one thanking you," Brandon replied. "Thank you for letting me hear our baby's heartbeat. You know," she said faintly, "I was scared at first. I thought seeing you there would hurt again. But when I saw you looking at the screen, I realized you're not the same man anymore." Brandon stayed silent. Her words washed over him like a breeze through open air. "I've changed, Camille," he said softly. "Not to earn forgiveness, but because I can't stand the thought of disappointing you again." She set her spoon down, eyes steady on his. "Have you thought about what happens after the baby's born? Every day. And I want to be there," he said. "To help you. To stay up at night, change diapers, rock her to sleep, learn how to make bottles, and be a father. Not to prove anything, to finally do it right." Camille turned toward the window, watching the drizzle begin again. "Do you even know what it means to be a father? It means not running away," he said. "Even when you're scared, you stay." She looked back at him, half doubtful, half believing. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Brandon admitted, "but I'm ready for it to be hard." They both laughed, a small, genuine laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. When they left the cafe, the rain had grown heavier. Brandon opened his umbrella over her. "Let me take you home," he said. On the drive, they talked about small things, baby names, the crib, and Camille wanting to hang a family photo in the nursery, even if it was just her and the baby. Brandon listened, his heart aching. When they reached her building, Camille turned to him. "I have a prenatal class next week," she said. "They allow fathers to attend. If you want to, you can come." Brandon looked at her, eyes lighting up. "I'd love to, but don't embarrass me in front of everyone." "I promise." She smiled softly and nodded. "Then I'll see you Friday." He watched her walk inside before driving away. The rain was still falling, but it didn't feel cold this time, because inside him, something had begun to bloom, a real, fragile hope. That night, he went home, opened his laptop, and typed into the search bar, "How to care for a newborn first-time dads." Hundreds of results appeared. He chuckled to himself. 7 months ago, he had seen a baby as a burden. Now, he saw it as a miracle. He printed out articles and taped them to his wall, practiced folding cloth diapers, watched videos on lullabies, even learned the silly nursery songs Camille used to hum. And in the late hours of the night, as the desk lamp cast soft light over his tired but peaceful face, Brandon realized he wasn't just waiting to become a father. He was learning how to love again, slowly, humbly. Outside, the rain kept falling, but to him, every drop now carried the rhythm of hope's tiny heartbeat, the beat that had saved 2 lost souls. Seattle was colder than usual at the end of December. The rain no longer poured, it fell softly, like the long sighs of winter. In her small second-floor apartment at Sunset Gardens, Camille sat by the window, one hand resting on her belly, listening to the faint heartbeat inside her, a sound only she could hear. On the table beside her lay a folded appointment slip from Mercy General Hospital. Friday, 6 p.m. Parenting preparation class. She looked at the words and smiled faintly. She wasn't sure why she had told Brandon he could come. Maybe it was because of how he'd looked during the last ultrasound, the look of a man seeing something sacred for the first time, something greater than himself. At 6 sharp, Brandon arrived. He wore a dark sweater and carried a small canvas bag. I brought a few things, water, a towel, and snacks. Do you want to bring anything else? Camille chuckled. You're acting like we're going camping. I just don't want you to get tired. You're such a nervous student, she teased. Well, yeah. Brandon smiled. I'm a first-time student in the School of Fatherhood. The line made her look away, hiding her smile. They drove to the hospital together. The classroom was on the 3rd floor, filled with the scent of disinfectant and mint tea. Around 10 other couples had already arrived, primarily young, excited, and full of laughter. Brandon and Camille chose seats in the back, near the window. Their instructor, a brisk middle-aged woman with cropped hair, introduced herself. Hello everyone, I'm Linda. I've been a maternity nurse for over 20 years, and I'm here to help you understand what will happen during the most unforgettable hours of your lives. The room chuckled softly. Brandon glanced around. Every couple was holding hands. He looked down. Camille sat still, her hands on her lap. He didn't dare reach for them, but he placed his hand nearby, close enough to be there instantly if she needed him. Linda began with a video showing the stages of labor. Brandon sat upright, eyes fixed on the screen, absorbing every word. For some reason, his heart pounded as if he were the one about to give birth. Camille glanced at him, watching him frown in concentration, occasionally tilting his head to jot down notes. A strange feeling stirred in her chest part, affection, amusement, and peace. Then came the breathing exercises. Linda smiled. Okay, dads, this part's important. Breathe with the moms. Deep inhale, slow exhale. Steady rhythm, gentle voice. Don't command, accompany. Brandon turned to Camille. Ready? Don't make me laugh, she said, though her lips were curling. Inhale, he said slowly. And exhale. She followed his lead. Their breath sank steady, calm. She was surprised to realize it truly helped. Linda looked over and smiled. Perfect. The couple in the back is doing great. The whole class turned. Brandon flushed red. Camille nudged him lightly. See? Now we're the teacher's pets. I don't mind, he whispered, as long as you're comfortable. When the laughter faded, the next activity began, learning how to assist during contractions. Linda handed each pair a mat. Moms, sit forward. Dads, kneel behind. Place your hands on her lower back and apply gentle pressure. Match her breathing. Camille hesitated. You sure about this? Yeah. Just tell me what to do. She sat down, leaning forward slightly. Brandon knelt behind her, placing his hands on her lower back, warm, steady. Like this? A little lower. He adjusted, moving his palms in slow circles. She took a deep breath, then exhaled. How does that feel? Better than I expected, Camille murmured. Don't stop. Brandon said nothing, continuing quietly. The room fell still, only soft music, and Linda's voice filled the air. Love isn't just a vow spoken at a wedding. It's the choice to stay when things hurt. Brandon's chest tightened. He looked at Camille's hair, a few dark curls falling loose, and wanted to say 1,000 apologies. But he knew this wasn't the moment for words. This was the moment to show it through hands that didn't waver. When the exercise ended, Linda approached them, smiling. You two seem very in sync. I'd guess you've already been through a lot together. Camille stayed silent. Brandon said, We're learning how to start again. Linda nodded. Then keep going. The baby can feel that. The class ended around 8. Outside, the drizzle shimmered under the streetlights, reflections dancing across the wet pavement. Brandon opened the truck door for Camille. You don't have to do that, she said softly. I know, but I want to. She smiled, her first genuine smile in months. Thank you. Tonight was better than I expected. Me too. You know, I never thought I'd sit in a class learning how to breathe, how to massage, how to help. But maybe it's the best thing I've ever done. She looked at him for a long time before saying, You've changed, Brandon. How so? Before, whenever things got hard, you went quiet and left. But now, you're here, listening, patient. Because now I understand, he said quietly. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. It's choosing to stay. Camille turned away, hiding the shimmer in her eyes. You sound just like Nurse Linda. Maybe I'm a quick learner. She laughed, a slight sound that filled the car's quiet space. When they reached her building, she turned to him. Do you want to come up? To help me carry the bags? Nothing more. Brandon nodded, his pulse quickening. Of course. The apartment was still small, but fuller now. Baby crib, packs of diapers, a whiteboard on the wall that read, Week 35, Baby Hope, 2.6 kilograms. Brandon looked around, pride and ache mixing in his chest. You did all this yourself? Yes, but now I have help. He smiled, putting away the shopping bags. When he turned back, Camille sat in a chair, hands over her belly, eyes closed. Tired? He asked. A little. She's been kicking non-stop. Can I? Brandon gestured toward her belly. Camille opened her eyes, then nodded softly. Go ahead. He knelt and placed his hands gently on the curve of her stomach. Almost instantly, he felt a strong kick. She's saying hi, he whispered. Maybe she's reminding you not to make me cry again. Brandon laughed through his tears. I promise, never again. Camille said nothing. She just watched him, the man who had once broken her trust, now trembling because of a single kick from the child they had made together. For the first time, she saw in his eyes not just regret, but real love, the kind that had learned to stay quiet and present. Outside, rain whispered against the glass. Inside, two people sat still, their hands resting over a tiny life that stirred between them, a fragile hope, mending what had once been broken. The rain in Seattle still fell soft and steady, like the quiet breathing of a city that never truly slept. Camille sat on her sofa, watching the warm lamplight spill across her notebook titled Welcome Plan for Baby Hope. She had written it weeks ago. Each page was filled with neat handwriting, the doctor's name, due date, hospital essentials, a shopping list for newborn items, everything planned carefully, except for one thing, who would be there when she gave birth. She hadn't dared to write that part, though deep down, she already knew the answer. For nearly 2 months now, Brandon had kept his promise. He didn't intrude or ask for more than she could give. He showed up steadily, patiently, always when needed. Every morning, a small box of fresh fruit waited at her door. Every night, a brief message. Sleep well. I'm close if you need me. No flowers, no grand gestures, just quiet, genuine presence. That evening, he arrived carrying paint cans and brushes. I thought I'd paint the nursery for Baby Hope, he said, smiling. Soft yellow, right? You once said kids like colors that feel like sunlight. Camille looked at him for a moment. You really remember that? I remember everything. She started to say something, then only nodded. All right, but keep it quiet. The neighbor downstairs complains easily. I promise. They began the work together. The room was small, barely 10 square meters, with a window overlooking the playground. Brandon spread a drop cloth, opened the paint, and the scent of fresh color filled the air. Rolling up his sleeves, he began painting slow, careful strokes. Camille sat in the chair watching him, his hands strong, capable. The same hands that had once trembled when touching her belly in class now moved with steady purpose, as though repairing something far greater than a wall, maybe even his own heart. Have you done this for clients before? She asked. Every day, he said, but I've never painted a room that made me this happy. She didn't answer. She just watched as the pale yellow spread across the wall, warm and bright. After nearly 2 hours, it was done. Brandon stepped back, paint on his hands, smiling wearily. What do you think? Camille looked around. The soft yellow walls glowed in the lamplight. White curtains swayed gently at the window, and in the corner sat the small crib he had assembled the week before. It's beautiful, she said softly. Really beautiful. His smile softened. I've never been good with apologies, he said quietly. But if I could repaint our life, I'd cover every day that made you cry in this same shade of yellow. Camille turned away, pretending to inspect the crib. Her voice trembled. No one can repaint the past, Brandon. I know, he said. But I can make the future brighter. Silence filled the room, broken only by the gentle tapping of rain on the window and the mingled scent of new paint and vanilla candles. "I need to sit down," Camille murmured. "She's kicking hard tonight." He quickly pulled a chair for her, then knelt beside it. "Can I?" She nodded. His hand rested gently on her belly, careful as though touching something sacred. A slight kick, then another, stronger one. Brandon laughed, a pure, unguarded sound. "Someone doesn't like the smell of paint. Maybe she's protesting your noise," Camille teased softly. He looked up, and his gaze was so tender she had to turn away. "I never imagined," he said quietly, "that happiness could be this small just being here, hearing her kick, seeing you smile." Camille turned toward the window. The rain still fell in a steady rhythm. She didn't answer, but something in her chest melted quietly and warmly like the golden paint drying on the wall. A week later, Seattle was struck by its first snowstorm of the season. Camille was asleep when thunder cracked, waking her in the dark. Her belly tightened a contraction, maybe just Braxton Hicks, but this one was stronger than usual. She tried the breathing techniques she'd learned, but the pain didn't fade as quickly. She stumbled to the living room and called. "Brandon." His voice came over the line, tight with worry. "Camille, what's wrong?" "I think it's just a false contraction, but it hurts more than before." "I'm coming." "You don't have to." But he'd already hung up. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door, urgent against the storm. Brandon stepped in, his coat soaked, breath fogging in the cold air. She sat curled on the couch, clutching her belly. "I told you," he said, kneeling before her. "You just have to call." "How long between contractions?" "About 10 minutes, but it's easing now." "Let's time it," he said, pulling up an app. "If it's under 5 minutes, we're going to the hospital." Camille looked at him, half wanting to cry and laugh. "Do you always take things this seriously?" "This time I have to," he said. "I won't risk anything with you or the baby." Another contraction came. She gripped his hand, breath breaking. "It hurts." "Look at me, Camille." He held her gaze. "Breathe like we practiced. Inhale, exhale. That's it. You're doing great." She followed his rhythm, her breathing steadying. When the pain subsided, she leaned against his shoulder, exhausted. He didn't speak, just held her hand quiet, steady. "Can you stay a while?" she whispered. "I'll stay all night if you need me." Brandon spread a blanket on the couch, never taking his eyes off her. Outside, snow piled thick on the streets. Streetlights spilled through the window, glinting off Camille's pale face as she slept. He sat there silently, listening to the ticking clock and the slow, even breathing of two lives, sharing the same room. By dawn, the storm had passed. Camille woke to find him still there, head tilted back, coat dusted with snow. She gently pulled a blanket over his shoulders, and in that moment, for the first time in months, she whispered to herself, "He really has changed." When Brandon awoke, she stood by the window, sunlight from the melting snow glowing in her hair. He walked to her quietly. "Beautiful morning," he said. "Yes," she answered, smiling faintly. "How about coffee? 2 sleepless companions deserve a cup." Hope would like the smell of her mom's coffee. Camille laughed softly. "Hope likes your voice more. She kicks every time you're here. Then maybe she's the first to forgive me." "Maybe," she said, gazing out at the glistening street. As for her mother, she's still learning to trust again. Brandon nodded, not pushing further. He knew trust couldn't be asked for, it had to be proven, night after night, hand after steady hand, through every moment he chose to stay. That morning, in the small Renton apartment, the scent of coffee mingled with sunlight, pushing away the last chill of winter. And in Camille's heart, for the first time, one truth became clear. Trust doesn't return in an instant. It returns through quiet acts, one by one. And the man before her was doing just that, day by day, night by night. February in Seattle brought no snow, only rain, persistent, cold, and quiet, like the unease growing inside Camille. She was 38 weeks along now, her belly round and heavy. Even climbing a flight of stairs left her breathless. Brandon came by almost every day. He helped her shop for groceries, pack the hospital bag, and tidy the nursery. He didn't talk much, he just did. On Monday night, Camille called him over, her voice gentle. You can take a break now, Brandon. I'm fine. I know you are, he said, tightening a washed baby bottle cap. But I want to be here when she comes. You're already here. I see that. But you also need to live your own life. He smiled softly. My life is here, Camille. Things might have been different if I'd realized that 8 months ago. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. I don't hate you anymore. Thank you. But forgiveness, I'm not asking for that, he said. Just the chance to stay. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Rain began to fall harder, pounding the glass. Camille looked out. The storm's coming. Yeah, Brandon said quietly. But I think we'll make it through. He didn't know that in a few hours they would face a storm far greater one that would break not over the city, but inside the bright white walls of Mercy General Hospital. 2:47 a.m. Brandon was asleep on the couch when the phone rang. Her name lit the screen. Camille? Her voice trembled. Brandon, I think something's wrong. What is it? The pain, it's different. And there's blood. He shot upright. Don't move. I'm coming. Outside, the storm had truly hit. Wind howled, rain lashed the streets. Brandon threw on his coat, grabbed his keys, and bolted for his truck. The old Ford roared to life, headlights cutting through the curtain of rain. When he reached the apartment, Camille stood in the hallway, pale and shaking, her nightgown soaked. He rushed to her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I'm here. Breathe. Okay? Deep and slow. It hurts, Brandon. I know. I know. We're going now. He carefully carried her down the slick stairs and into the passenger seat. The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain and fear. She clutched his hand through every contraction, her breath short, her body trembling. We're almost there, he said, voice steady but trembling. You're doing so well, Camille. Just hold on. The storm raged as he pulled into Mercy General's emergency bay. He ran inside, shouting, OB emergency, 38 weeks, heavy bleeding. Nurses rushed out with a gurney, wheeling her away. Brandon followed until the doors slammed shut in his face. 1 second, 2, then 30 endless minutes. He sat in the hallway, hands shaking, heart pounding with every sound from behind those doors. Finally, Dr. Sarah Martinez appeared, her scrubs damp with sweat, her eyes grave. She has preeclampsia, her blood pressure spiked, and we suspect early placental abruption. We're stabilizing her. You're her husband. Brandon swallowed hard. We're divorced, but I'm the baby's father, the person she trusts. Then stay. She needs that. He nodded. The door opened. The room beyond was blinding white, the air heavy with antiseptic. Camille lay on the bed, face pale, hair damp with sweat, tubes and monitors surrounding her. Brandon took her hand. Her eyes fluttered open. The baby. Is she okay? She's fine, he whispered. The doctor said she's strong. You need to breathe, okay? If something happens, don't say that. His tears fell freely. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She squeezed his hand weakly. Promise me? I promise. No matter what happens, I'm here. Outside, the storm battered the windows. Inside, time seemed to stop between her ragged breaths and the urgent beeping of machines. Dr. Martinez returned, voice calm but firm. We have to do an emergency C-section. Now. Brandon nodded, forcing his voice steady. You hear that, Camille? Everything's going to be okay. You're strong. She nodded faintly. As the nurses rolled her bed away, she clutched his wrist. If I don't make it, you will, he said. I believe in you. I'll be right here. The doors closed behind her. Brandon stood frozen in the hallway, tears mixing with rain on his face. 8 months ago he had run from fear. This time he stayed. He prayed not for himself, but for the woman behind that door, the woman who had taught him what it truly meant to stay. 2 hours later, the doors opened. Dr. Martinez stepped out, exhaustion softening into a small smile. They're both okay. She lost a lot of blood, but we've stabilized her. The baby's healthy, 6 pounds, 12 ounces, a strong little girl. Brandon couldn't speak. Tears fell as he whispered, "Thank you." They led him into recovery. Camille lay resting, weak but conscious. Beside her, a nurse placed a small bassinet. Inside, a tiny girl with dark hair and pink skin wriggled gently. "Our daughter," Brandon breathed. Camille opened her eyes, voice hoarse. "Do you want to hold her?" He nodded, his hands trembling as he lifted the baby. She was warm, real, a living piece of them both. "Hi, Hope," he whispered, voice breaking. "It's Dad." The baby blinked, meeting his gaze pure, unknowing, forgiving. Brandon turned to Camille, tears spilling freely. "You did it. Thank you for not giving up." She smiled faintly. "Thank you for staying." Outside, Seattle's sky cleared after the storm. Sunlight broke through the clouds, pouring into the hospital window, washing over 3 people who had just crossed from fear to miracle. Brandon sat for hours, holding her hand, watching their newborn sleep. He thought of everything the first time he met Camille at the community project, their arguments, her tearful goodbye, and now, this moment, her giving life to their daughter in the middle of a storm, her light never fading. Dr. Martinez returned, smiling gently. "Do you know what she said before we put her under anesthesia?" Brandon shook his head. "She said, 'He's going to stay. He won't leave me again.'" Brandon leaned down, kissed Camille's forehead, his voice trembling. "She was right. I'm not leaving again." In the quiet room, Hope stirred, her first cry breaking the stillness, small but strong, like the opening note of a new song. Outside, the storm clouds had vanished. Sunlight gleamed over the rain-soaked city. Seattle had weathered the storm, and so had Brandon, Camille, and their daughter, Hope. That morning in Seattle, dawn arrived as gently as a baby's breath. The rain had stopped. The first light streamed through the hospital window, falling across Camille's face, pale but peaceful. She lay on her side, gazing at the bassinet beside her, where Hope slept soundly, wrapped in a pale pink blanket, her tiny hands twitching as if she were dreaming. Brandon sat in the chair beside the bed, head bowed from a sleepless night. When she stirred, he lifted his head instantly. "Are you in pain?" "No, just tired." She smiled faintly. "You haven't slept, have you?" "I couldn't. Whenever I closed my eyes, I feared I'd wake up and you'd be gone." Camille looked at him. In his dark ringed eyes was something she thought he'd lost forever, tenderness. "Is Hope sleeping well?" "She's just like you," Brandon said softly. "Beautiful, even in her sleep." Camille laughed, though the movement made her wince. "You're terrible at saying things like that to a woman who just had surgery." "I'm not terrible," he said. "Just honest." He stood and walked to the bassinet. Hope shifted slightly, her lips pursing as if searching for her mother's warmth. Brandon slipped a finger into her tiny hand, and she gripped it tight. The feeling nearly broke him. "She's strong," he murmured, eyes fixed on their daughter. "Like you." Camille said nothing. Tears welled not from pain, but from the return of something she thought she'd lost: trust. A week later, Camille was discharged. Brandon had cleaned the apartment, bought a rocking chair, and rehung the curtains so the afternoon light wouldn't fall directly into Hope's crib. The day they came home, the air was cold but full of sunlight. Brandon carried Hope, stepping carefully, as if afraid to disturb a fragile dream. Camille followed behind, one hand on the railing, moving slowly. "Sit and rest," Brandon said once they were inside. "I'll take care of everything. You don't have to do it all. I want to. For both of you." She sank into the sofa, looking around. The pale yellow walls he'd painted now surrounded the soft hum of their new life. There was a faint scent of baby powder mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee. When he placed Hope in her crib, Camille spoke quietly. "You know, in the operating room, I heard the doctor say her heartbeat was dropping. I was so scared, and the only thing I could think of was you." Brandon froze. "I was outside, praying every second." "I know," she whispered, "because I felt it." Her voice broke. "You really did stay, Brandon." He sat beside her. "I've gone far enough to know there's no safer place than right here with you two." Camille looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but her smile was genuine. "Our daughter will have a good father," she said softly. "And maybe I can finally start to believe again." The first weeks of parenthood were a test no class could prepare them for. Hope cried most nights, and Camille was exhausted from sleeplessness. But Brandon never left. He learned to swaddle, mix formula, and change diapers, clumsy but patient. He set alarms every 3 hours, pacing the living room with Hope in his arms, humming "You Are My Sunshine" in his low, tired voice. One night, at 3 in the morning, Camille woke to the sound of that voice. Through the dim light spilling from the next room, she saw him in the rocking chair, Hope cradled in his arms, singing softly, "You'll never know how much I love you." She stood in the doorway, watching silently for a long time. Her heart was at peace for the first time in nearly a year. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains, Brandon brought her a cup of warm ginger tea. "You don't have to do anything today," he said. "I washed the laundry, made oatmeal, and Hope just fell asleep. You're not a superhero, Brandon." "No," he smiled. "Just a man who lost everything and got lucky enough to be given a second chance to do it right." She looked at him for a long time before saying quietly, "I don't know if I've forgiven you yet, but I do know I'm not afraid anymore." He nodded, setting the cup down before walking to the crib. "Hope is our miracle," he said. "She came to teach me how to love the right way." Camille moved beside him. Hope stirred, opening her eyes to both of them. For a moment, words felt unnecessary. Outside, the rain began again, but it wasn't cold this time. It sounded like warmth, like hearts learning to beat in sync again after the storm. 3 weeks later, on a soft, sunlit afternoon, Brandon told Camille to dress nicely. She raised an eyebrow but did as he asked. He drove her and Hope to a small park, the same one where they'd first met years ago at a charity event. He placed a small bouquet of sunflowers on the wooden table beneath the trees, the kind she'd once called smiling sunlight. "You remembered?" she asked softly. "Couldn't forget. Every time I see them, I think of you." She laughed, bending down to tuck the blanket around Hope in her stroller. When she looked up, Brandon was kneeling before her, holding a small, simple ring, nothing dazzling, but glowing in the golden light. "I'm not asking you to forget the past," he said, voice trembling but sure. "I'm asking to write the next chapter with you. I can't promise every day will be easy, but I can promise I'll never walk away again. So, Camille, will you marry me?" Camille looked at him, then at their sleeping daughter. She remembered the storm, the white hospital room, the trembling hand that refused to let go. And she knew love wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward, differently, together. "Yes," she whispered, steady and clear. "I will." Brandon broke down, pulling her close, careful not to wake Hope. In the quiet park, rain began to fall again, not as a warning, but as a blessing. Camille rested her head on his shoulder and said softly, "Maybe Hope didn't just come to teach you how to love right, but to teach me that sometimes happiness does find its way back." Spring had come to Seattle, bringing with it soft rains and the earthy scent of wet ground. On the porch of their small Renton home, the sunflower vines Brandon had planted a month earlier had begun to bloom, bright and golden. Hope was 6 months old, lying in her stroller, kicking her tiny feet as she listened to rain falling on the roof. In the kitchen, Camille stirred a pot of pumpkin soup, the warm aroma filling the house. Behind her, Brandon was fixing a wooden shelf. He worked quietly but glanced at his 2 girls occasionally, his eyes carrying a calm light fuller than any dream he'd ever had. "Don't tighten the screws too much," Camille reminded him gently. "I know," he said. "I'm practically an expert in baby furniture now." She smiled. "You said the same thing when you built the crib." The next night, it squeaked all night long. Brandon looked up, pretending to protest. "That was on purpose. It helped rock Hope to sleep. Didn't you notice?" Camille laughed, the sound warm and bright, filling the little kitchen. There was no longer distance between them, not because every wound had healed, but because they had learned to tend to them together, like caring for flowers after a storm. That afternoon, the rain eased. Brandon carried Hope to the porch, catching the last few drops in his hand. "My girl," he whispered, "I used to think rain meant goodbye. Now I know how the sky softens its heart." Camille stood by the door watching them. She said nothing, just let the quiet peace before her sink in the kind she once believed she'd never have again. Brandon drove Camille to the community center one morning, her first day back at work. In her hands was a file for the new project, Temporary Housing for Single Mothers. As she read the title, Brandon squeezed her hand lightly. "Are you ready?" "Maybe not completely," she admitted. "But I want to go back. I want to help the women who were once like me." He nodded. "I'm proud of you, Camille." She smiled, then looked out the window. "I thought everything was over the day I left you. But maybe God just pressed pause so we could learn how to love again." Brandon reached over, brushing her hand. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life learning." When they got home, Hope was waking from her nap. She squealed with laughter the moment she saw her dad. Brandon bent down, kissing her cheek. "Did you know your mum started a new beginning today, little one?" Hope answered with a happy coo. Both of them laughed, and nothing else needed to be said. That summer, Seattle glowed brighter than usual. Johnson Construction was thriving again, with 2 significant projects underway. Brandon had rehired his old crew and opened a small office in Kent. He worked hard, but went home every afternoon at precisely 5 o'clock. Because 5 o'clock was Hope's bath time, Camille often teased him, a CEO who clocks out like a 9-to-5 worker. He'd grin and reply, half joking, half true, "No client's more important than my smallest one." Every night, after putting Hope to bed, they'd sit together on the couch, a quiet song playing in the background, mugs of hot cocoa in hand. Camille would read, Brandon would type on his laptop. Sometimes they didn't speak, but the silence felt easy, complete, not empty. One night, Camille looked up and said softly, "Do you remember the first day we met? You were covered in mud at the community center, and I wore a red dress." Brandon laughed. "I do, and I remember the way you talked about helping those kids. That look in your eyes made me want to be a better man." "You already became one," she said. He turned toward her, his voice low, warm. "No, you made me one." Camille looked at him for a long time, then rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't regret giving you a second chance." He wrapped an arm around her. "Thank you for letting me stay." Outside, rain began to fall again, but it wasn't cold or grey. Just a soft rhythm on the roof, blending with Hope's steady breathing in the next room, and the faint hum of music drifting through a Seattle night. A year later, the small Renton community held its summer festival, where Johnson Construction had sponsored a new playground. Camille helped manage the booth for the community center, while Hope, now toddling, wandered around the sunflowers her father had planted. Brandon scooped her up, lifting her high. Both of them laughed, sunlight spilling over their faces. A photographer captured that moment, a man in a blue shirt holding his daughter under golden light, and a woman behind them smiling softly. Weeks later, the photo hung in the community hall under a sign that read, "Love Builds Homes." No one knew it was their true story, 2 people who had once lost each other and found their way back by choosing to stay. Camille stood with Brandon beneath the sunflower arch when the crowd had gone home that night. Hope slept soundly on his shoulder. She whispered, "What do you think she'll remember about her childhood?" Brandon smiled. "Maybe the sound of rain on the roof." And her mother's laughter. Camille looked up at the cloudy sky and smiled. "And I'll remember that you didn't leave again." He tightened his arm around her. "I never will. Not because I'm afraid to lose you, but because I know this is home." Camille leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the rain fell softly once more, golden light glinting through it, casting 3 gentle shadows on the porch, a small family, whole but straightforward. Their story didn't end with happily ever after, but with something more honest. They chose to love every day, once more. And sometimes, that alone is enough of a miracle.